to my kitchen. If you're new here, my name is Leah, and today I have some meal prep for you. I love to spend less, create more, and show you how you can do the same. So if you're interested in that, make sure you stick around, give this video a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments what you enjoy to see in the future. So today I'm going to be making some homemade bread. We need to get some sandwich bread done. I also want to make some homemade chocolate granola for the first time. I will leave in the description box my video of my regular granola recipe that I use with cinnamon. And today we're going to try a different flavor profile. And then I also was thinking about doing some kind of like muffin or breakfast cookies. I'm going to use my bread maker today just to knead the dough for me and let it rise. And then I'm going to end up putting them into bread loaf pans and bake them in the oven myself. So the first thing I want to do is get all of my ingredients together. I am using butter in this recipe. The butter that I'm going to use is just some butter Crisco. I have that on hand already soft. I need some sugar, bread flour. I also need some water, some yeast, and some salt. So in the bottom of this pan, I'm going to put the water first. So because I am cutting this recipe in half, I did the first 1/4 cup of water in there, and then I used 1 1/3 cup of warm water after that. So whatever the math is on that, I'm not sure, but it's 1 1/3 plus 1/4. Next, I need 4 tablespoons of sugar. And then we're going to do 5 cups of bread flour. Next, I need 1/2 tablespoon of salt. I need 1 1/2 tablespoons of soft butter. And then I need 1 packet of yeast. This yeast I purchased on clearance. I'm just using this up, and then I'm going to start having my own larger container of yeast. But for the recipe, I think it's about 2 teaspoons of yeast is what you need. Then we're just going to put this into the bread maker. I'm just putting it down onto the dough setting and starting it. Next, we're going to move on to our granola. So I have here my oats. I'm just going to be using some old-fashioned rolled oats. And because we're going to try a chocolate recipe this time, I have my cocoa powder unsweetened. You're also going to need some vanilla for flavoring, and then the oil of your choice, which I'm using olive oil. It's what I always have on hand, what I always use. And I don't notice a difference in flavor when it comes to making, granola. I always use it. And then I also need some sweetener of some sort, and I'm going to choose maple syrup. You could also use honey. This is just what I always do. And if you're making regular granola, you would want, in my opinion, to use cinnamon. You can add nuts, fruit, all that. But today we're doing chocolate. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is mix in our wet ingredients. I'm going to use 1/2 cup of each, oil and maple syrup. Then we're going to add in about 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Whisk that together, and then we're going to add our cocoa powder. That's going to be 1/3 cup of unsweetened. Next, we're going to add in 4 cups of our oats. Your oven is going to need to be preheated to 350, so make sure you have that done. And then you're also going to need a parchment lined cookie sheet, or you can use what I have, like a silicone baking liner. Works out really well. Anytime that I can do something that's reusable and it's not really inconvenient to do so, I prefer to do that. I used to think that making granola was like so intimidating, but it's really not hard at all. The biggest thing is just to make sure you use a lined cookie sheet so that it doesn't stick too bad, and then you also want to make sure it is spread out pretty evenly so that it cooks really well and you don't end up with clumps that are, you know, undercooked. Just gonna spread that out a little bit and just get that into the oven. All right, so now it's time to stir this up. We're halfway through the baking process, and I'm going to add some coconut so that way it becomes the Almond Joy Granola. So we're just going to do about a half a cup. And don't forget the almonds, because Almond Joy has almonds. So there you have it. We're gonna go ahead and put it back into the oven for another 10 minutes. Just make sure that it is, you know, spread out nice and thin again. All right, so this is what it's like once it comes out of the oven after 20 minutes total of baking. And it's not gonna be crunchy yet, don't worry. It will harden or crisp up as it sits. So just go ahead and give this a little stir and then let it cool. I'm going to put it onto a platter and then reuse my silicone baking dish for these breakfast cookies. The next thing I'm going to get started on are the breakfast cookies. So I need 2 mashed up bananas, and these are frozen, so I'm going to get those defrosted real fast in the microwave. We're going to need half a cup of peanut butter. I'm going to use this powdered one and just make my own real fast. So we need half a cup. Okay, another quarter cup. All right, next to the peanut butter, we're going to add these bananas. Then we'll add about a teaspoon of vanilla and a teaspoon of cinnamon. Then we're going to add 2 cups of oats. Go ahead and place the cookies onto a lined baking dish, and you can do this however you want. They're not going to spread, so they don't have to be too far apart when you're baking. And then you can either leave them in a ball shape like this or flatten them out yourself, because they will not flatten on their own in the oven. So however you want them to be shaped, go ahead and do that before baking. While I'm waiting on the cookies in the oven and the bread dough to finish rising, I'm just going to utilize the rest of that peanut butter that I mixed up and put together some peanut butter cracker sandwiches for the kids. It is one of Malin's favorite snacks, and I like to use the peanut butter powder mixed up like this as opposed to the regular natural peanut butter that I have in my pantry, because the jar of natural peanut butter is really runny, and so it doesn't work too well with cracker sandwiches like this. But I went ahead and put together sandwiches into some reusable bags and into the pantry for the kids for the week, and my daughter ended up eating quite a few of these, and honestly, I don't feel bad about that at all. Now that our bread dough is ready to go, we're going to put this onto our counter and split it into 2 pieces. Technically, the recipe says that this is for 1 loaf of bread, but I find that it works better to split it into 2 and let it rise extra long It just gives it a really airy feeling bread. It's not quite as dense. And I think this is the trick to making a perfect sandwich bread. So once you have that split, you're going to roll it out a little bit flat, not necessarily with a rolling pin, but just get it a little bit more flat. And then you're going to roll it up into somewhat of a tight log and then kind of fold under the edges. You're also going to need to have your 2 loaf pans greased, and you can use butter or oil. I'm using olive oil here. And then just stick both of those loaves into the loaf pan. And then you're going to need to let them rest for about 30 to 45 minutes or until it's completely risen to about double the size. So I find that the best way to do this for me is to have both of the pans sitting on top of the stove as the oven is preheating to 400 degrees. That gives it a nice warm environment, and make sure you have both loaves covered with a towel. Once your bread comes out of the oven, it'll pop right out of those pans really easily. Let it cool on a cooling rack for at least an hour before slicing into it. And then determine how much bread you actually want to use for the week. Anything that you're not going to use that week, go ahead and slice up, put it into a freezer bag, and then you can freeze it. This will last a long time in your freezer. It freezes beautifully, but I definitely recommend slicing it before you freeze it. And then the loaf of bread that I'm going to use that week, I just wrap it up in some beeswax wrapping, or you can put it into a bag. Thanks for hanging out with me today in our meal prep and our meal planning. If you have any questions, make sure you let me know down below. And I hope that you have found some inspiration and to make some things that maybe you felt a little intimidated to make prior to today. So if you make them, make sure you let me know. And until the next video, I'll see you in the comments.